The BMW i4 is among one of my favourite all-electric saloons, and now we've got its slightly larger sibling, the i5. Now unfortunately, it does come in at a steeper price point. The eDrive 40 with its rear-wheel drive configuration starts from £74,000. If, however, you want the full shebang, you'll want to go for the xDrive M60, and that will cost you a whopping £97,500. So in this review, you're going to be comparing it to its slightly smaller sibling, the i4, and to see if the i5 is actually worth its price tag. So to kick off, let's talk about performance. And here you've got a few different trims, at least at the time of filming. There are three to choose from. First off, you have got the eDrive 40 M Sport and the M Sport Pro models. These have got a singular motor that's planted on the rear axle, therefore driving the rear wheels only. Now combined with the 81.2 kilowatt-hour battery pack, you've got a total power output of 250 kilowatts or 340 horsepower. You've also got 400 Newton meters of torque, where it's claimed to get to 62 miles an hour in 6 seconds. It also has a top speed of 120 miles an hour. Now for my own test using RaceLogic's Performance Box Touch, I had the M Sport model tested from 0 to 20 miles an hour in 1.66 seconds, 0 to 30 miles an hour in 2.5 seconds, 0 to 60 miles an hour in 5.3 seconds, so yes indeed far lower than what the manufacturer claims, and 50 to 70 miles an hour in 2.35 seconds. Now should you want an even more head-crushing experience, you'll want to go for the M60 xDrive, because this integrates two motors, one at the front and one at the rear. And combined with the 81.2 kilowatt-hour battery pack, it outputs a staggering 442 kilowatts of power, or 601 horsepower, and 795 Newton meters torque. It's claimed to get to 62 miles an hour from a standstill in just 3.8 seconds, and has got a top speed of 142 miles an hour. Now yet again, I had it put through its paces using RaceLogic's Performance Box Touch in the exact same location, and here I had it tested from 0 to 20 miles an hour in 1.23 seconds, 0 to 30 miles an hour in 1.8 seconds, 0 to 60 miles an hour in 3.69 seconds, and 50 to 70 miles an hour in just 1.56 seconds. So yes indeed, the M60 model is the way to go, at least if you want the peak performance from the BMW i5. So aside from its exhilarating straight line speed, what about when it comes to its handling characteristics? Well, here I'm very pleased to report that the i5, very much like its sibling the i4, has got that real sense of connection with the front axle. You've got a good sort of one-to-one steering input, and even the driver's position makes you feel low down and therefore connected with the road that's under you. I've got absolutely no complaints whatsoever. Similarly, its suspension system is an absolute work of art. Yet again, something that I've commended BMW in the past, be it in their larger sized SUVs or indeed in its saloon, the i4. Here, the i5 feels like it takes it one step further. Now, as standard on the eDrive 40 models, you will find an M Sport suspension. However, for an additional £2,400, you have got the Adaptive Suspension Professional. This effectively gives you better steering input, a tighter turning circle, and a slightly better suspension system, all of which just give you an even more comfortable drive, specifically when you're doing those longer drives. Now on the M60 model, this comes fitted as standard. However, you do also have the option of a £4,000 Adaptive Suspension Pro package, not to be confused with the professional package, and this effectively gives you anti-roll bar stabilization and also an even better suspension system. Indeed, over here, this is fitted on this M60 model that I'm currently driving, and I can tell you it is absolutely joyous. When you're going around town, it's soaking up the anomalies, the speed bumps and the potholes. When you are going to be going around winding country roads, it holds its own and doesn't seem to roll, and indeed that stabilization really comes into play. And thanks to the fact that you have also got an all-wheel drive configuration on the M60, it even gives you a better sense of confidence. Now I should point out that the eDrive 40 models have got a rear-wheel drive configuration only. However, the xDrive M60, as the name might suggest, does indeed operate on an all-wheel drive system. Indeed, over here, the all-wheel drive system does an excellent job of giving you great traction on the road, but the rear-wheel drive configuration also propels you from the back, so therefore you still get that sense of enjoyment and you don't have any sort of wheel spin to worry about either. Now, past the overall performance and the handling characteristics of the i5, what about when it comes to its electric range? Well, here, as standard, at least at the time of filming and in the UK, you've got an 81.2 kilowatt hour battery pack. You've also got a heat pump that comes featured as standard. This is across the entire trim range, no matter if you're going for the eDrive 40 model or the xDrive M60. Now, the manufacturer claims that in the eDrive 40, you'll get between 312 to 357 miles, at least on the mixed WLTP test cycle. However, the M60 xDrive nets between 284 to 315 miles. Indeed, that secondary motor does have an impact in terms of the overall electric range. Now, this very much actually goes hand in hand with my own tests, because from my own mixed driving, I netted roughly 240 to 260 miles on the eDrive 40. However, on the xDrive M60, I netted roughly 210 to 230 miles. Now, granted, these figures aren't exactly class leading. You'll be quick to say that the likes of Tesla actually offer far better. But if you do look past that and you look at some of its German counterparts from the likes of Mercedes-Benz or even Porsche or Audi, the BMW i5, very much like the i4, actually does fare pretty well. So therefore, in terms of the overall electric range and therefore the amount of lowered range anxiety that you will have, well, here I should commend the manufacturer for actually doing a pretty good job. Now, in order to be as efficient as possible and to recoup energy back into the battery pack, you want to enable a degree of regenerative braking. And here it's quite a shame that you have no means of actually adjusting it on the fly. Instead, via the infotainment system, you'll have to go via the adaptive, the higher or the medium or the lower regenerative braking mode when you're in drive. However, thankfully, you can shift down on the gear selector that is found towards the center console and go into B mode, which I'm currently in. So if I lift off the accelerator pedal, the vehicle will actually decelerate pretty quickly and come to a complete standstill. Even though I actually was a little bit short from the end of the roundabout, I was just trying to demonstrate over here that you can actually have a complete one-pedal drive, which does actually go amiss on some of the rival alternatives. So it's great to see that BMW have yet again incorporated a one-pedal drive on the BMW i5. Now, of course, you can recoup energy at a much more rapid rate. And here, via CCS port, you have got up to 205 kilowatts of input, which is actually pretty impressive. Better still, the overall charging curve, at least at what was shared by the manufacturer, was actually very good, making it among one of the best electric vehicles out there on the market in terms of keeping its state of charge, and furthermore, in comparison to the rest of the BMW lineup. Now, this means that if you do find an appropriate charge point, you can go from 10 to 80% in just half an hour. If, of course, you find a regular 50 kilowatt input, it will take you a lot longer. Now, as for its Type 2 port, you can go from 0 to 100% on the eDrive 40 model in 8.5 hours. This is due to the fact that it has got an 11 kilowatt onboard charger. However, in the xDrive M60 model, you have got a 22 kilowatt onboard charger. And as such, you can achieve the same amount of charge in just 4 hours and 15 minutes. This is also available as a 1,200 pound option in the eDrive 40 models. So past how it's on the road, let's talk about its interior. And here it is finished in a cloth material. Should you want a quilted Veganza leatherette, this will not actually cost you any additional extra. However, if you do want a real leather finish, it will cost you £2,100. You've also got a few different trim finishes that range from a completely free option up to £400. Now, you might have also noticed a crystal looking bar that stems across the entire dashboard, and this is called the interaction bar, which has come from the BMW i7, and it very much does look the part. Furthermore, it does serve a secondary purpose. For example, if you have your hazards on, it will be flashing red. A nice little touch from the manufacturer. Now, it's worth noting over here that the interaction bar does actually have a few touch-based controls, and this is to adjust the climate, in other words, the overall fan speed. However, if you do want to adjust where the ventilation is actually going towards, there's a few physical controls found just underneath it. Now, in terms of the other crystal look around the cabin, you will find them towards the center console. This, however, will come in at an additional £600, but it does very much look the part. This perfectly brings me on to interacting with the i5, and here you've got a flurry of physical controls by the center console and some that are found by the steering wheel, which are certainly appreciated. However, it's a shame that the manufacturer has eradicated dedicated climate controls. Indeed, over here, should you want to adjust the climate, such as for example the temperature, you'll have to faff around with the infotainment system. Thankfully, on the other hand, you have got the 14.9-inch curved display, which is extremely responsive and vivid. It is a little bit convoluted with the plethora of different options, but once you get your head around it, it will actually become second nature. Furthermore, it's great to see that it supports Android Auto and Apple CarPlay over a wired and wireless connection. Speaking of which, the third-party mobile operating systems feed through turn-based navigation data straight to the 12.3-inch instrument cluster, which is certainly appreciated. Furthermore, this display can be customized to a certain degree and therefore gives you that sort of personalization. Now, should you want to take things one step further, you have got a head-up display. This is featured only within the technology pack, which will set you back an additional £2,000. Now, the head-up display is one of the largest that I've ever seen on any sedan vehicle. Indeed, it is absolutely massive. Now, thankfully, you can actually reduce its overall size, but should you want to use it in terms of its default configuration, you might actually find it quite handy, because you can pretty much see a complete map view straight projected in front of you, therefore allowing you to keep your eyes planted on the road at any given time. Now, past all of this, I would just like to have a quick word about its audio system. And here, as standard, you've got a 12-speaker 205-watt Harman Kardon configuration. Should you want to go one step further, however, you want to go for the 18-speaker 655-watt Bowers & Wilkins system. This costs £1,250 in the eDrive 40 models and comes featured as standard in the M60. What I'll say subjectively is the latter system does actually do pretty well across the sound frequency range and will leave a lot of people excited. However, it's not exactly as impressive as the flagship system that is found in the BMW i7, which is also by Bowers & Wilkins. Now, no matter which sort of audio system you go for, the overall cabin noise is kept down to a minimum. Not quite class leading, but very much in comparison to some of its alternatives out there, and the likes of its sibling the i4, it will do actually a pretty good job, be it when you're traversing at lower or even higher speeds. So past all of this, it brings me on to seating comfort. And here I've got no issues whatsoever at the front of the cabin. Indeed, the seats themselves are adjustable and are heated as standard. However, the same couldn't be quite said at the rear. Headroom is a little bit limited, specifically if you're sat in the middle, and as for legroom, due to the diagonally wedged seats, it means it will cause a little bit of discomfort on your thigh and quad muscles. Furthermore, it's very disheartening to see that the manufacturer has not optimized the transmission tunnel, which is completely unneeded in a fully electric vehicle. Granted, it's coming from the regular 5 Series, but it would have been great to see the manufacturer actually addressing this. Alas, that's not the case. Similarly, it is quite disappointing that should you want rear heated outer seats, you'll have to splash out a whopping £5,000 on the Comfort Plus pack. This comes in at £3,750 on the M60 variant. This does also bring a few extra goodies, such as the comfort front seats, which are ventilated and certainly appreciated when it comes to the overall ergonomics, and a heated steering wheel, but given the overall price point of the vehicle, one might have expected all of these to come featured as standards, but alas, that's not the case. A small little note to make is that if you do want a heated steering wheel, you can actually opt for a cheaper option, but this will still come in at £1,700. Now, what does come featured as standard across the entire trim range is a small little screen at the rear of the cabin. This is useful for your climate controls. However, it's not overly customizable and is nowhere near advanced as the likes of what you would find on the Tesla Model S Plaid. So while I do appreciate it, I do think it might be a little bit redundant in terms of its overall use case. Speaking about the Tesla, which integrates 2 wireless chargers at the front of the cabin, it is slightly baffling to see BMW actually omit one of them. Nonetheless, it will serve a purpose, and they've got a non-slip bay as well, which means that your phone is not going to be sent flying. Now, you've also got 2 USB Type-C ports, which can be used to also connect up to the infotainment system, and a 12-volt socket that's found within the center armrest compartment. At the rear of the cabin, you've got 2 USB Type-C ports as well, which provide charge. You will also notice that there are USB Type-C ports found at the rear portions of the front seats. However, this comes integrated within one of the comfort packs and therefore ranging from £1,700 all the way up to £5,000 should you want this extra luxury. Now, elsewhere, in terms of the overall storage, the center armrest compartment will suffice for the small size goods, and you've also got the glove box, although it's a little bit limited, and then you have got the door bins, both at the front and the back. And there's also a pull-down armrest compartment that is found at the rear of the cabin. Now, it would have been great to see the manufacturer actually optimize storage a little bit more, because towards the front, the center console area is absolutely massive, and yet there's no actual areas to store any of your goods. This seems to be a little bit of a missed trick from the manufacturer, specifically if you look at some of its key competitors. Now, of course, when it comes to storage, we have to talk about its boot capacity. And here you've got 490 litres to play around with. The official figure with the seats dropped down has not actually been shared by the manufacturer, but I do suspect it is actually pretty large. Now you've got 40-20-40 rear split folding seats, and you've actually got a very sizable underfloor compartment, which will be very handy for taking your charging cables. It is worth noting, however, that the BMW i5, despite its elongated bonnet, does not have a frunk, which does seem to be a missed trick. With that in mind, it perfectly brings me on to practicality, which is a little bit poor. See, if you want to be dropping down the rear seats on a regular, you have to release them via a latch that is found towards the boot, and then go towards the second row and then drop down the seats manually. It would have been great if they were fully motorized, like you'd find on some rival alternatives. Similarly over here, it does not have a hatchback design, and as for the tailgate itself, it is only manually operated. Should you want an electric tailgate, you actually have to opt for the comfort pack, which will set you back over £1,700, which to me seems pretty ridiculous. So with all that out of the way, let's talk about its exterior design. Now of course looks are pretty subjective, so make sure you share your own thoughts down in the comment section below. What I'll say subjectively is that I quite like its silhouette. I'm not too fond of its overall frontal profile, namely due to its slightly oversized kidney grills, but thankfully it's not too bad. Furthermore, it's actually illuminated on certain models, such as the M60. It does very much look a little bit different in comparison to some older BMWs. As for its real profile, it actually does look very good. You've got these very nice looking tail lights, and it's got that sort of aggressive flair to it, specifically if you go for the M60 or for the M Sport Pro model. Now, in terms of its sidewall profile, in the M Sport model, you've got 19-inch alloys that come fitted as standard. In the M Sport Pro, however, and the M60, you've got 20-inch alloys. Now, on the M Sport model, you have got the option of different styled 19-inch alloys, 20-inch alloys, and 21-inch alloys. They will cost you between £500 to £3,000. On the M Sport Pro and the M60 models, however, you have got different styled 20-inch alloys and 21-inch alloys, which will set you back between £500 and £2,000. As for the overall colour finish, it comes as standard in white, but should you want a metallic finish, this will cost you £900 on the eDrive models. However, on the M60, it is completely free. If, however, you don't want to take things one step further, you might want to go for one of the individual finishes, and this will set you back between £1,095 up to £3,300. So past its exterior design, let's talk about crash safety. Now at the time of filming, it hasn't been tested by Euro NCAP. However, the BMW i4 was given 4 out of 5 stars, while the older 5 Series that was tested in 2017 was given the full 5 out of 5 stars. Now as standard, the BMW i5 has lane change warning, rear cross traffic alert, exit warning, rear collision protection, among a few others. On my tested vehicles, I actually had adaptive cruise control with steering support, and this was absolutely fantastic on the motorway. Not only did it keep me at a safe distance from the leading vehicle, but it also didn't feel jerky whatsoever, and the steering support was excellent, even at higher speeds. Now I would like to point out there is a new feature that I've come across from the BMW group, and that is the sort of steering support that you have when you're changing lanes. Here you can indicate and look towards your mirrors, and it will automatically change lane for you. Now while this is very much appreciated, I do find it somewhat redundant, as it's nowhere near as advanced as what you'd find on some rival alternatives, namely from the likes of Tesla, which will automatically steer for you as soon as you've indicated, and therefore the vehicle is smart enough to decide if there is an object next to you. Now when it comes to overall parking, the visibility at the front, side and rear are actually pretty good. You've also got a rear view camera and sensors all around the vehicle. Should you want to up the ante, however, you might want to go for 360-degree cameras and parking assistance. This will be comprised within the technology pack, which will set you back an additional £2,000. So with all that in mind, it brings us on to our verdict. And quite frankly, the BMW i5 does tick a lot of boxes. It very much builds upon the i4 and has given you a slightly larger vehicle. It's very comfortable to drive, has got that heightened sense of driver's input. It's got plenty of technology within the cabin, albeit a little bit overwhelming at times, and you've got a good amount of storage when it comes to its boot. The biggest consideration, however, is in terms of its electric range and the overall price that you're paying. Indeed, over here, if you compare and contrast it to the i4, it might seem like a bit of a tough sell, including if you do look at some of the alternatives out there from the likes of Audi, Porsche, Mercedes-Benz, or even Tesla. Now we'd be curious to know what you make of the i5 down in the comment section below. And of course, if you like this independent detailed review, definitely do consider dropping a like, subscribing and hitting that bell notification, all of which would be greatly appreciated. As such, I've been Chris from TotallyEV, and I'll hopefully see you in the next one. Take care of yourselves and goodbye.